In a landmark decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has brought an end to a pivotal Trump administration policy that has shaped the nation's economic landscape for years. This move marks a significant turning point in the ongoing debate over how the United States manages its trade relationships and economic interests on the global stage. By invalidating tariffs on goods from China and several key allies, the court has effectively dismantled a trade strategy that once stood at the heart of America's approach to international commerce. These tariffs, which were imposed on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of imports, had far-reaching consequences for businesses, workers, and consumers alike. The Supreme Court's ruling not only overturns a major economic policy, but also challenges the very framework that has governed U.S. trade for decades. For years, these tariffs influenced everything from Wall Street's performance to the price of everyday goods, and their removal signals a dramatic shift in the nation's economic direction. At the heart of this decision lies a fundamental question about the balance of power between the president and Congress. The court's action tests the limits of executive authority, raising important questions about who truly controls America's economic destiny. Tariffs, which are essentially taxes on imported goods, are designed to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. While they can help certain sectors, they often lead to higher prices for consumers and can spark retaliatory measures from trading partners, escalating tensions and uncertainty. The Trump administration wielded tariffs as a tool to renegotiate trade deals and confront what it saw as unfair practices by other countries, especially China. This marked a sharp departure from decades of free trade policies, signaling a new era of economic nationalism. The shift away from free trade agreements toward a more protectionist stance sent shockwaves through global markets. Allies and rivals alike were forced to reconsider their own trade strategies as the U.S. signaled it was willing to upend established norms to protect its interests. The first wave of tariffs targeted steel and aluminum, industries seen as vital to national security. Soon, the measures expanded to cover a vast array of Chinese imports, from electronics to clothing, affecting nearly every corner of the American economy. As tariffs spread, businesses faced mounting uncertainty. Companies struggled to adapt to rising costs, shifting supply chains, and unpredictable market conditions. Many were forced to make difficult decisions about hiring, investment, and even survival. For some, the impact was devastating. Soaring costs and closed markets led to layoffs, shuttered storefronts, and a sense of instability that rippled through communities across the country. These challenges sparked a wave of legal battles, as businesses and trade groups questioned the legality of the tariffs. The historic Supreme Court decision is the culmination of years of courtroom drama and political debate. The economic landscape became a battlefield, with industries, workers, and consumers all caught in the crossfire of a global trade war. Every move on the international stage had the potential to reshape fortunes and futures. Ordinary Americans felt the effects in their daily lives, from higher prices at the supermarket to uncertainty about their jobs and businesses. The trade war was no longer an abstract policy, it was a reality for millions. All of this turmoil culminated in the Supreme Court's decision, a moment that will be studied by economists, lawmakers, and historians for years to come. As the dust settles, America's trade policy landscape has been fundamentally reshaped, setting the stage for a new chapter in the nation's economic story, one defined by fresh challenges, new opportunities, and the enduring question of how best to compete in a rapidly changing world. The Trump administration justified the imposition of tariffs through a combination of legal authority and economic reasoning, presenting their case to the American public and lawmakers alike. Officials argued that these measures were not only within the president's power, but also essential for protecting the nation's interests in an increasingly competitive global economy. The administration emphasized that tariffs were a tool to address long-standing issues that previous governments had failed to resolve, such as unfair trade practices and the decline of American manufacturing. Central to their argument was the claim of executive authority granted by Congress. The administration pointed to specific legislative acts that gave the president the power to act decisively in matters of trade and national security, especially when American industries were perceived to be at risk. One of the most frequently cited laws was Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. This provision allowed the president to impose tariffs on imports that threaten national security, with steel and aluminum imports being prime examples. The administration argued that a strong domestic steel industry was vital for defense and infrastructure, and that foreign competition, particularly from countries with state-subsidized industries, posed a direct threat. Another key legal foundation was Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. This law enabled the United States to respond to unfair trade practices by other countries, with a particular focus on China's policies regarding intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and market access barriers. The administration claimed that these actions were necessary to create a fairer trading environment and to push back against what they saw as decades of economic aggression from abroad. In addition, the administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to justify even broader tariff measures. This move was controversial, as it expanded the president's authority to address what were described as national emergencies related to international trade. Critics argued that this was an overreach, but supporters saw it as a bold step to protect American interests. The administration's aggressive legal stance was framed as a necessary response to years of job losses and the erosion of American manufacturing. By taking a hard line, officials hoped to send a message that the United States would no longer tolerate practices that undermined its workers or its economic sovereignty. The tariffs were designed to reverse the trend of factory closures and economic decline that had affected many communities across the country. By asserting U.S. dominance in trade negotiations, the administration aimed to restore confidence in American industry and signal a new era of economic nationalism. This narrative of economic revival and national strength resonated deeply with many supporters, who saw tariffs as a way to reclaim lost jobs and restore American pride. At the same time, the policy faced mounting legal and political opposition, with critics warning of potential retaliation and economic fallout. Ultimately, the Trump administration's rationale for tariffs was a blend of legal interpretation, economic theory, and populist messaging, an approach that would shape the debate over trade policy for years to come. The legal challenge against the tariffs was led by small businesses, not corporate giants. Companies like VOS Selections and Learning Resources faced existential threats from the tariffs. They argued the tariffs were an unconstitutional overreach, increasing costs and creating uncertainty. Large corporations remained silent, fearing political retribution, leaving the fight to smaller players. The core argument was that Congress, not the president, has the power to regulate commerce. The case reached the Supreme Court, highlighting the need for congressional approval in trade wars. Small businesses stood for the principle that commerce regulation belongs to elected representatives. The Supreme Court case presented two visions of presidential power and economic policy. The Trump administration argued for broad executive authority to address economic threats. They warned that overturning tariffs would destabilize trade and weaken the U.S. globally. Small businesses countered that the administration's interpretation dangerously expanded presidential power. They emphasized the Founding Fathers' intent to limit executive power in taxation and commerce. The case was a profound debate over separation of powers, with the economy's fate at stake. The court's decision would redefine the balance of power in trade policy. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court struck down the tariffs as unconstitutional. Chief Justice Roberts reaffirmed Congress's role in regulating foreign commerce. The ruling emphasized non-delegation, limiting presidential discretion in trade policy. The court found the administration's use of laws like IEEPA an impermissible stretch. Dissenting justices argued for broader presidential power in foreign affairs. The ruling ordered the cessation of tariffs, reshaping American trade law. It set a precedent constraining presidential power in economic matters. Small business owners celebrated the Supreme Court's decision as a relief and vindication. For many, it was a moment of triumph after years of uncertainty and struggle. The ruling provided a sense of stability that had been missing for so long. Sarah Thompson, a furniture company owner, expressed relief at regained predictability. She mentioned how the constant changes in tariffs had made it nearly impossible to plan for the future. Now she feels she can finally focus on growing her business without the looming threat of sudden financial burdens. Mark Chen, an importer, described the tariffs as an asphyxiating tax. He explained that the unpredictable costs had forced him to cut back on staff and delay expansion plans. The ruling, he said, was like a breath of fresh air, allowing him to breathe easier and think about the future again. The ruling allowed businesses to plan without fear of sudden tariff changes. This newfound stability means that companies can invest in new projects, hire more employees, and contribute more effectively to the economy. It's a significant step forward for small businesses everywhere. Business owners had faced financial strain and uncertainty, delaying investments and hiring. Many had to make tough decisions just to keep their doors open. The financial pressure was immense, and the unpredictability made it even harder to navigate. The decision was seen as a victory for a stable and fair business environment. It signaled a return to a more predictable and manageable landscape for small businesses, which is crucial for their growth and sustainability. The coalition of businesses demonstrated that even small players can affect monumental change. Their collective voice was powerful enough to bring about a significant legal shift, proving that unity and persistence can lead to substantial outcomes. The ruling reinforced the principle that no one is above the law, not even the president. It was a reminder of the checks and balances that are fundamental to the American legal system, ensuring that justice prevails, and that the rights of all citizens, including small business owners, are protected. The Supreme Court's decision will impact consumers, businesses, and workers. Consumers may see lower prices as tariffs on imports are lifted. Businesses reliant on global supply chains will benefit from reduced costs and stability. However, some domestic industries fear increased foreign competition. The ruling is expected to boost economic growth by removing trade barriers. The decision fosters efficiency, encourages trade, and lowers costs. The transition will require careful management to mitigate negative effects on certain sectors. Overall, the ruling promises a more dynamic and resilient economy. The Supreme Court decision redefines presidential power boundaries in the U.S. It reasserts Congress's primary authority over trade and taxation. The ruling is praised by business groups and foreign governments for restoring rule of law. Critics argue it weakens the presidency's ability to protect American industries. Future administrations must work closely with Congress for trade measures. The decision recalibrates the separation of powers, reinforcing constitutional design. It ensures trade war authority remains with Congress, not the executive branch.